so important to the legacy of gymnastics and that it can actually be art, not just a name that you put in front of gymnastics in air quotes, artistic gymnastics. It can actually be that. And Brooklyn Morris has embodied that since she potty trained herself in order to go to gymnastics.
Remember, this show is PG-13, so you might hear a naughty word or two.
We have 2 new skills for women from the World Cup this past weekend. We have conference champions. They are, or as I like to call them, the bragging rights championships. Stanford, UCLA, Utah, George Washington, Penn, Central Michigan, Illinois, Southern Utah, Utah State, UW La Crosse, and LSU. That's all the bragging rights champions for the conference championships. And was Arkansas denied the right to compete? We will delve into this issue. Plus, Jade Carey launched her relationship with her girlfriend on Instagram. Plus, all the regional qualifier excitement. Today is March 24th. And welcome to GymCastic, the #1 gymnastics podcast in the galaxy. I'm here with Spencer from the Balance Beam Situation, who live blogged all the details this weekend. You can find it at the Balance Beam Situation. Remember, for a limited time, Spencer.
Oh, I'm ready.
Our live show season pass is on sale. So we do 4 live shows a year that's in front of an audience with special guests. So we're going to do NCAAs, Classic, Championships, and then 1 to be TBD'd, maybe in Jakarta, at World Championships. And so you get 4 live shows, the online ticket, for the price of 3. And if you want to upgrade and come in person, you can just upgrade your ticket. So it's a really good deal. You get 1 for free, basically. So get those now at gymcastic.com. Headlines. First, let us begin with the most important thing that happened this entire history of gymnastics, which is Brooklyn Morris finally got her 10.
I was wondering how long it was going to take you to talk about Brooklyn Morris getting a 10.
Has anything else ever even happened in gymnastics? No.
Apparently not.
This is the most important thing that happened. Brooklyn Morris, so important to the legacy of gymnastics and that it can actually be art, not just a name that you put in front of gymnastics in air quotes, artistic gymnastics. It can actually be that. And Brooklyn Morris has embodied that since she potty trained herself in order to go to gymnastics. True story. We're so happy that this finally happened. Congratulations to Brooklyn Morris. And Riley McCusker also got a 10 on bars, which is also absolutely freaking gorgeous.
Jessica does not recognize any of the other 10s, but those 2 you will allow.
We're going to talk about all the 10s today. Jade, we talked about this a lot on Behind the Scenes on Saturday. Jade Carey, 2-time Olympic champion from 2 different Olympics, revealed her girlfriend this weekend on the Instagrams. And we are so happy for her. And it's also like, I just think about how, I mean, obviously there have been girls dating girls in all the sports.
Since 1982 when the NCAA invented women. Yeah.
But it's only been, I think, 5 years since the first woman came out publicly. Gabrielle Douglas at MSU came out publicly. That's such a short time. It's only 5 years, and now it's like, it's normal. It's not a big deal at all. Alona Kratz, I remember she was out in high school and then went to Mizzou. We have, Sav, of course, came out at Florida. It's like, de rigueur, as they say now. And it makes me so happy that that's what it's like. Okay, so there's new IOC president news.
There is, yes.
So Watanabe of the FIG.
Yeah, he ran for president. He did not win. He got 4 votes.
Smoked.
I don't think anyone was expecting. He was not expected to win. He was not expected to get a lot of votes. So,
He didn't get the least amount of votes.
So that's solid. That's something, right?
2 people that got 2 votes, period. I think 3 that got 4 votes. But now, instead, we have the first ever African and the first ever woman Olympic presidents in the history of the Olympic Games. 4-time Olympian herself. And of course, promptly, her family's house was burgled and her family tied up. So I guess they don't provide instant secret service when you become IOC president for your family, which I think they should probably do now. So we're hoping they're all okay. Spencer, we got new skills at the World Cup. Let's discuss.
Yes, 2 new skills. First of all, the Jaeger full is now the Yang. Yang Fanyuwei got the Jaeger full hit it at the World Cup in Antalya in Turkey. This is the skill, if you remember, very controversially, that Suni was trying to go to a World Cup to get named after herself, and then she was not selected, and we're not over it, basically. Because what is the point of these World Cups if not to embrace the spirit of Yang Fanyuwei and go do a cool skill and get it named after yourself? That is the whole point. So well done. Excellent. We also have a new dismount that you're very into.
I'm super into this
Okamura.
dismount.
Okay.
Because we were discussing, and I was like, oh, this is terrifying as a concept, but so well performed. So it's a front flyaway with so you're facing the bar, you do a front flipping flyaway, but then she half turns and does a back pike out of it. And it's so well done, so beautiful. It's not scary at all, but just how did this come up? It's a double flipping thing that looks like it's so scary to watch, but she does it really well. It's not like she's landing with her teeth on the mat or anything. I mean, they're a little close. They might be like 2 feet off the ground. I mean, it's not a perfect landing, but it looks like she stops in the air, does a couple twists, and then does a back pike. It's amazing. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised. One of those things I'm surprised this didn't already exist.
Yeah.
Like in the 70s or something, which, I mean, a lot of these skills do. But I'm really surprised some, like, Soviet from 1978 wasn't like, I did that. It was weird.
I bet I know we're going to find out, like, the Soviet gymnast who did this, or someone that did this in, like, you know, their level whatever championships in Ohio in whatever year is going to write in and be like, I used to have that named after myself in the level 10 code. Because there is a US code where you can get things named, and then there's the FIG code, and I love that you can domestically have a skill. Okay, so there was controversy this weekend going into the conference championships, aka the bragging rights championships that don't really mean anything except for the coaches that get bonuses, but they do count as NQS qualifying scores. Now, we talked about this a lot, and if you are a Club Gym Nerd member and you support us, you get a live podcast every week where you can ask us questions, and there might be something you got to see real-time investigative journalism discussion where I hadn't told Spencer the information I had, he didn't tell me the information he had, but then we discussed it in real time, and we're like, oh, all right, and it gave me more things to follow up with, which I have. So, can you set the stage, and we'll look at Jordan Weber's statement, because Arkansas didn't compete this week.
So basically, the new format for the SEC championships this year, because now they have 9 teams since Oklahoma joined the conference, was that the top 8 teams in the conference would qualify to the conference championship for the first session, 4 in the second session. The 9th place team would not qualify to the conference championship, wouldn't be able to compete. That ended up being Arkansas. This has been controversial throughout the season. We've talked about it several times. I think it's not really overall been popular. I found it exciting. I was against it at first, then kind of found it exciting as we got down to it. Like, ooh, who's going to make it? It's some other stakes to have when you're watching, like, the end of the regular season, when you've seen all of these routines 10 times, and you're like, okay, we get it. It was something to follow.
It gave us the battle basement meet,
right,
where we had the bottom 2 SEC teams, and we're like, who's going to be out? And lo and behold, it was Arkansas.
Yeah. Then Arkansas was like, hey, maybe it's not great that every Division I team except for one, us, is able to compete at a conference championship or other meet, which is significant because Oregon State doesn't have a conference, so they were able to organize a hosted meet. Arkansas was like, maybe that isn't great. We want another chance to improve our NQS. They tried to join this Oregon State meet. Oregon State was hosting Fisk. And that schedule change was denied by the NCAA committee. So this has been very controversial. Jessica and I had a light disagreement about it. Basically, you feel that Arkansas should have been allowed to compete at the Oregon State meet.
Yeah, so this is the thing. So since doing more research on this and talking to sources, there was a meeting. So at the end of every year, the coaches have the coaches conference. It's at Level 10 Nationals, now called Developmental. And they all get together and they fight about what the rules should be. And I think you could say discuss or propose. I'm going to say fight about, because there are coaches like Greg Marsden who just stopped going because he was like, this is stupid. No one wants to progress the sport. This is dumb. We're never going to go again. Greg Marsden, 10-time NCAA champion or college champions from Utah. So a discussion, I tried to find this in writing somewhere, but it's not in writing anywhere in any of the notes from any of these meetings because it was just discussed. There was a discussion from the SEC schools or the SEC conference that they didn't want in the NQS score to include conference championships because they were like, well, it's scored differently. So what we got with the denial to Arkansas was the argument that the scoring is different and you can't change your schedule. Arkansas's argument was, of course, we're not changing the schedule, we're just changing where we compete, and that's allowed. So there are two things about this. One, I kind of love that the NCAA committee denied Arkansas's petition based on scoring, because that was one of the arguments that it's like throwing it back in the conference's face, that they were like, you said these shouldn't be allowed, so we're just agreeing with you. You said the
scoring was different at conference championships, so if the scoring is different at conference championships,
right, then
you can't replace it with another meet.
With a different meet. You have to count this meet. So on the other hand, I think you are allowed to change locations with extenuating, and that's allowed if something happens. But they are following precedent in that they didn't allow Georgia to change locations for a meet. Georgia thought because of inclement weather they weren't going to be able to make this meet. It ended up not happening, that there was bad weather, so they could have competed. So they're following precedent on the one hand. The biggest thing is this was all avoidable if the SEC teams just said in last year, if the SEC teams had said, well, we're going to have one team out, so we should all have one meet scheduled with Oregon State because they don't have anyone in their conference, which, by the way, you guys, I find it so hilarious that the news has picked up this thing about that there's a gymnast who has won every all-around and every beam title in every single meet the entire season in the Pac-12. And I'm like, yes, Jade Carey has this record because there's no other teams. She's competing alone against herself. There's no other team. I mean, it could have been one of her teammates, but I'm like, well, that's a fun stat that they created, but it's ridiculous. Also, I don't trust any of it anymore because I'm like, there's also this whole story that there was that Fox had the first ever gymnastics meet on Fox TV. And I was like, no, that also happened like 10 years ago. This is not new. It's just like there's no one left who knows the history, or else they don't want to acknowledge the history because they're like, no, this is great. Let's hype it up and say this is the first time it's ever been done. Anywho,
you still have not shown me the meet that was allegedly on Fox.
Okay, I will find it, but it did happen before. It was not the first time.
And we're not talking about like a Fox Sports local or anything like that.
I will find it. It did happen. Okay. So long story short, all of this could be fixed if the SEC teams decided they were all going to have a meet with Oregon State, who doesn't have a conference, whoever the 9th team out was a long time ago. And, to my information, my sources tell me that Arkansas did try to have a meet, but they couldn't find judges for it. They couldn't get anyone assigned because all the judges, of course, are off at all these conference meets. And there's more judges at the conference meets. So, long story short, we both agree that this is a preventable situation.
Yeah, definitely preventable. I kind of feel like my general feeling is you don't get, which I said on behind the scenes, is that like this was the format that they decided. You can say it's a bad format, but that was the format of the championships months ago. So you didn't qualify. So you don't get to then add a meet if you lost the format that was decided upon, essentially.
Yeah, and my thing is like, yeah, you should have all just decided to have whoever the loser of conferences already has a team. The other thing that I think when we say you decided, I mean, this is how it works now. The TV, the strongest TV, the TV decides. The conference with the strongest TV contract and the most money, aka SEC network with ESPN, decides everyone else's schedule. Everyone else gets their schedule late after they have their TV slots. This is the way it's worked in other sports for years. But now gymnastics is big enough that it's happening to gymnastics. So it sucks in a way for everyone else because they don't have the schedule power of the TV network. But, there's plenty of billionaires in the United States. They're busy messing up the government. So one of them could, take on this gymnastics situation and fix it. I mean, we're ready to run a gymnastics TV network. We have all the things that you should put in place to make it the best ever. We're ready. Billionaires, get in touch. So
do you think it is, like, talking like, for next year, do you think there should be a change in how they do things? Or will there be a change in how they do things? Or, I mean, we could talk about like logistics of when you're allowed to add a meet, like conceptually. Do you think it's right that Arkansas is the only team that didn't compete?
Conceptually, no. I think they should have been allowed to have a meet. Because so many teams that have no chance of getting to NCAAs did get to have a meet. And so I'm like, it shouldn't matter what your ranking is. You should still be able to have a meet this weekend. Mm-hmm. So conceptually, but is it a controversy? No. Is it a scandal? No.
I think it's a controversy because it's fun to have controversies. And I think my general impression is that most people think Arkansas should have been allowed to compete.
Yeah, I mean, we all agree they should have been allowed to compete. But have they been wronged?
I don't, because I think that would not be following the rules.
Yes. Well, have they been wronged?
I think they've been wronged by their own conference.
Yes.
But not correct. By the committee's decision in this specific case.
Yes. Agree. So next year, the whole SEC should have one meet with Oregon State on conference championship weekend. And then just one team will show up for it. Not everyone. That's the way you fix this. Yeah. Okay. So we should give updates before we go on. So, live show pass for our live shows, which are very fun. And by the way, if I didn't tell you guys already, if you have been on College and Cocktails, where we pick a meet, watch it all together, this week we're back to regular behind the scenes where we, if your lunch break on Friday, take it with us. It's either your lunch break if you're Pacific time, noon on Fridays, or it's your 3 p.m. snack slump when you're like just looking at the clock and can't get anything done because you're ready to go home from work. Join us instead. Have your
coffee break. Fun Friday night if you're in Europe.
Yes, exactly. We're back to that.
We missed our Europeans during NCAA season. We do it late, and then it's the middle of the night for them, and they're not there.
I so miss our Europeans. Like Carrie, I'm like, when Carrie's back, I'm like, we're back on the schedule. Anyway, we've been talking about this a lot on College and Cocktails, and that is that the live show at NCAAs, which is very fun. It's on the day off at NCAAs between the prelims and finals. And there's drinks, there's a margarita stand, a drive-through, because it's Texas, because you can buy alcohol and drive around with it. Drunk driving doesn't exist in Texas. Anyway, the margarita stand is delicious and very strong. So all the people that have had a margarita at our live shows and thought they were going to be fine and couldn't barely walk out can attest to the strength of these. You don't even need the whole thing. I do not drink them for this reason. But anyway, it's a very fun, and the topic, you guys, is going to be what happened on the Romanian side, amongst other things. What happened on the Romanian side of the floor finals at the Olympics. So this is the bronze medal floor finals, controversially, that should technically be in Romanian hands, are in one Romanian's hands, maybe not the right Romanian's hands, but the deserved Romanian's hand who followed the rules, and was taken away from Jordan Chiles. So we have a whole episode on it. But there's so many things that happened, you guys. There's so much that went on in Romanian gymnastics that we have not been able to talk about. And we're going to talk about lots of other things. It's going to be very fun. So there's always so much tea at these, and they're not public. You have to come, or you have be there in person, or get your online ticket. So the season pass is on sale now. College and Cocktails this week, regular behind the scenes at Friday at noon. And the drink this week is Pain of an Elimination, or the mocktail, as I always have. Pain of the Elimination. You can add the entire schedule to your Apple or Google Calendar. There's a link in the show notes. We also have a new store if you want to check it out. We're also open to designs if you guys want to add something to the store. But you got to get your stuff now. Should be ready for if you want to wear your stuff to regionals or NCAs. Buy your stuff now. Fantasy, we're going over the numbers and finalizing results. We'll send out an email with the final information. Plus, we're going to launch the regionals game very shortly. So your regionals lineup, so new team for regionals, lineups lock Wednesday, April 2nd. Time to be announced later. So, okay. Before we get to the Bragging Rights Championships and the regional show, let's begin with the GymTernet news, starting with the most important thing, starting with adult gymnastics. It's really for everybody and every age. Gymnastics is 7-year-old gymnast. I think he's in Finland.
It sounded like you said 7-year-old gymnast.
74. Like, he's 74. You guys, he's still doing handstands on rings and handstand push-ups. Would you look at that guy and think that he's 74?
No, but I also don't guess people's ages because that's a terrible, terrible game to play.
It is. Pregnancy and ages are not good games to play. It's very bad. This guy, gymnastics keeps you young, you guys. You know why? Because it's so freaking fun to do. So if you need inspiration, check out, we'll link this in the show notes. So badass, so strong, enjoying himself in one of the Nords. I'm sorry to loop you all together, but I can't read it's the language with a lot of zeros with lines through them, and it's very impressive. That's what I have to say. Okay, we talked about the precedent for shitting your pants on College and Cocktails in gymnastics.
Sure.
And that if you have a whole team of violent diarrhea, this is one of the cases where you can change a meet date because no one can make it to the meet because of the pants situation with the poop inside. And we discussed this as a reason, like for Arkansas, if everyone was sick, you can change your meet. But of course, I was like, oh, there's more precedent for this. Not just Ithora from the Netherlands admitting this at one of our world championships in a video, most embarrassing gymnastics moment. But we can always count on Sac State gymnasts for the entertainment. Mm-hmm. So we had a gymnast that did the trend that she doesn't know this yet, and it says, in 5 minutes, she's going to do her first warm-up and shit her leotard. Yeah, you guys, these are things that happen in gymnastics, just like in life. Gymnasts, they're just like us. Okay, LA 2028 watch.
Okay.
This is the LA Olympics, which we also debated whether they're going to be changed. We don't think the IOC will change the location, but I think, because of course the IOC won't, but I think that it could potentially be a boycotted Olympics. Ellie Black, no plans to retire.
She's not allowed.
She's going to be the Chuso.
We've established those rules. You're not allowed to retire.
Yeah, Ellie forever. I feel like Jade Carey and Ellie Black are going to be the Chusos of this generation.
Could do it.
Yeah, like Jade Carey, is she ever injured? Ever? She's like, can just keep going. Constantly. Nonstop.
But having a girlfriend power. It means you don't get injured. That's just science.
These are facts. If Chuso had a girlfriend, she would not torn her Achilles. We're going to have to inform her. USA Gymnastics announced their Hall of Fame inductees. They include world champion, one of only 3 non-Simone world champion, all-around champions in the last 8-10 years. How many years has it been? Since 2013? Morgan Hurd. Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. As Correct. She should be.
Round of applause. You didn't even use any sound effects? I'm shocked.
I know. It's too, she just is a statement in herself. Missy Marlowe, also Olympian who was in college, competed in the Olympics, Utah, also, and Rebecca Sereda, Barry Weiner, Gary Anderson, and Marc Yancey. Alice Kinsella who just competed in the Olympics in Paris, having a baby.
Well,
This is the thing. This is the time to have a baby because it's right after the Olympics, so you still have your funding. They can't kick you off of your funding. Well, if you're in the British system, at least if you're in a country that has, maternity time, they can't get rid of your funding because you've had a baby. So, Kinsella, smart timing on the having the baby for being an athlete. Peng, as in Peng Lee, great Canadian gymnast and UCLA champion. Peng won Music Video of the Year at the Indie Short Awards. If you haven't watched her, please, video. Shot by.
No, that's the name of the video. Pretty Please?
Pretty Please, that's it. There was another word in there.
I thought you were saying, please watch it.
No,
it's very confusing. Pretty Please, watch Pretty Please.
It's so good, and it will get stuck in your head. And also, it was directed by Vanessa Zamaripa, who is a stunt woman, has been in all the things, acted with Pedro Pascal many times. Let me just tell you guys.
And I'm sure you've never asked her about it.
I asked her very specifically in her interview all about Pedro Pascal. And then the Utah versus UCLA meet on Fox was ranked 12th in programming on Fox. So it did very, very well. So Fox, keep it up. They did it. That TV broadcast was so well done. I was really pleased with it.
Good Meat did very job.
Also, the gymnastics panel we did at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference is now available to view. And so we'll put a link in the show notes if you want to check out what our discussion was all about. Let us begin. Conference championships highlight.
NCAA, we're going? All right.
And while we discuss, we will watch a compilation of all of the 11 tens that were awarded this
Almost
weekend.
A record. For tens in a day.
Almost.
12. 12 is the record for most tens in a day. So we had 12 on the weekend because Jade got a floor 10 on Friday and then 11 tens during the conference championships because I don't know if you've heard, they weren't giving out as many tens this year.
Yeah, I mean,
So we only had 11 in a single day during conference championships.
Yeah, everybody knows it was a big problem all season. So actually this does tie the record then for the most.
No, the record in a day is 12.
Oh, in a day, not in a weekend of meets.
Not in a weekend, in a day.
They really missed out. They could have broken it. It was so close.
I know. So many opportunities.
Okay, which was the teniest 10 before we...
Oh, I mean...
Mara Tritcher-Slowly.
That's always my answer. Because I do think her routine is super clean and doesn't have, the little bars things that no one gets deducted for, which I'm sure Jessica would love to go into later. Yeah. So my thing with the tens, which we talked about a little bit on Saturday, was that I don't think those were the worst scores of the day.
No.
The tens were pretty tenny. I had some issues, but there wasn't anything where someone died and got a 10. It was all those 9.95s that should have been 9.8s that was getting me more. Yeah, Mara. Leanne's was very good. I had no issues with Leanne's bars. 10.
I feel like Sienna Alipio and Gabby Stevens made me the happiest, the beam 10s.
Well, that's a different conversation. And the answer was Brooklyn Moores and Riley McCusker made you the happiest.
They did make me the happiest, but those are the other
you've named
ones.
at least half of them as the 10 that made you the happiest.
I was not mad at any of the 10s, I guess, which is so rare. So I guess I had the same feelings as you. What's happening, Spencer?
I mean, I was still mad. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Don't pretend like I wasn't still mad. It's too many 10s. We shouldn't have this many 10s. But they weren't the worst 10s in the world, and I guess maybe I'm just over it.
This is why you can't pay attention to the scoring. It'll ruin your enjoyment of NCAA gymnastics.
Okay, then you're not allowed to pay attention to Brooklyn's floor scores. Then you're not allowed to care if she got a 10.
How dare you?
Because it's pay attention to the scores ruins gymnastics, apparently.
All right.
Even though that's the whole point.
Who had the highest score?
UCLA got the highest score on conference championship day.
Okay.
Would have been very interesting to see that UCLA performance and that LSU performance in the same place in front of the same judges.
It would.
Because they both did well and had places to improve.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was UCLA went the closest to competing to their fullest potential
Yes,
at
I agree.
conference championships. Like that
Yeah.
was, if you did that at nationals, you'd be like, we did everything we could possibly do. We didn't leave anything on the table.
I agree.
And like with LSU, they had a very good meet. And of the SEC teams, I think they had the most complete meet. They didn't have like the ups and the downs and then maybe some mistakes that still got 9/8. But they also like, there are definitely places where they'd say, oh yeah, we need to land better.
Yeah, they had the big, like LSU had the almost fall on floor and then a bunch of beam or vault hops and big hops and form in the air improved.
Even though they got a huge score on bars, like the way things went with Florida later and all the 10s, they'll feel like if Connor had stuck, if Haley Bryant had stuck, they'll be like, those would have been 10s probably, the way bars was being scored. So they'll still say they have room to improve for regionals, for nationals, presumably. But yes, so LSU won the SEC championship and unseated Oklahoma as the number 1 team heading into the real postseason, the elimination meets. So that's big news because that doesn't happen a lot, that Oklahoma's not number 1 team.
Wait, that was the first time in program history they won the SEC championships? That can't be right.
The first time in program history they finished the season at number 1.
Oh, okay. I was like, they've won before. Okay, I understand now. Thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had never like gone into the postseason elimination meets as the number 1 team before.
Yeah, they were number 2 for many decades.
Yeah. Well, not many decades, but many times.
For at least a decade. I was like, oh, here we go again. There was like 10 years where I was like, they're the team, they're going to win. And then when I didn't expect it because Oklahoma splatted, then they did it.
That's how you get in that's how you get in the door, though.
Yeah, because Oklahoma had a terrible...
If you're the understudy, you just put something in the drink, and then you're the star.
Make sure those vault mats slide, and you're in, which Oklahoma had for Oklahoma, a terrible meet. For gymnastics, an incredible meet. For a great meet. But they had like 4 major hiccups that were very unexpected, including 2
I wouldn't necessarily call them major hiccups. The
for
judges
them,
really weren't. But yeah, for Oklahoma, they had 2 people got caught in a cast handstand, had to recast on bars. Addison Fate had a very weird floor pass where she got jelly legs on her front tuck in combination and then only did a double fall instead of the 2.5 she was intending and then jumped around the last half twist.
Which we were like, don't jump! Just stay where you are!
Pretend like you wanted to do a double fall.
Gaslighting, like in the regional announcement show. That is your job.
Okay. Missouri heads into the postseason number 7. That's the highest in school history. Florida, we talked about the bars with the 2 10s for Leanne Wong and Riley McCusker. Everyone else, even people who weren't competing, got 9.95s, and they scored a 49.85 on bars, which is the highest bar score ever in the history of ever.
In the history of NCAA gymnastics, you guys, that's the highest bar score, 49.85.
And on College and Cocktails, I asked Jessica if that was the best bars rotation she'd ever seen, and she started laughing.
Pretty much. It was great, and they should be very proud of themselves, and they should celebrate like crazy. They should probably get that tattooed somewhere and celebrate it for the rest of your lives. But so so basically we're asking ourselves, in the Florida bar rotation, did you only see 0.15 in total deductions?
No.
Right.
The answer is no.
No. And this is the time of year, I feel like, again, we have to state that, like, I have so much appreciation for the judges because it's such a hard job, and the problem with NCAA judging is they're supposed to use the level 10 code with modifications, but if you do that, you won't get any assignments, which is the whole problem with the unwritten rules of NCAA judging, and it's not fair to the judges, it's not fair to the gymnasts, and that's why it needs to be overhauled, and that's where they're collecting all the data. They can finally have a supervisor of referees like all the other NCAA sports, but somehow gymnastics has gotten away with anarchy for how many years? 40 years now since the NCAA invented gymnastics? Yeah, I don't have any feelings about it. Also, Missouri gets my award for they should be the video that the FIG shows of what we mean by involvement of all the body parts, Missouri's floor rotation. They are actually dancing, not posing. Yes, just show that to the FIG judges. Which is the FIG judges, when they actually educate the FIG judges, like, this is what we mean, show that whole floor rotation. They do such a great job. Okay.
As you've mentioned several times, Brooklyn Moores and Riley McCusker both scored 10s. Shay Campbell is the Big Ten all-around champion. So that's add her to the list of the figured out beam in your last year of college gymnastics, which is a long history of gymnasts who maybe they were elites or level 10s, beam wasn't really their thing, early college career, not really making the lineup, especially on top teams because they weren't super consistent or didn't have the skills, and then they get it in their last year. So I think Shay Campbell is in that. Definitely have her on the list. For the former Pac-12 teams, won their new conferences. So Stanford won the ACC, UCLA won the Big Ten, Utah won the Big 12. My highlight of conference championship day was that qualification to regionals came down to the very last routine. So basically the setup was, which we talked about a little bit before, West Virginia and Towson were sort of in control in that they had a certain goal score that they knew if they scored it, they were in for regionals. Both of them had mistakes on bars, didn't get their clinching scores that they needed. So then they're waiting to see what happens. And so there was still an opening as we got down toward the end of the day for UC Davis to make it in because West Virginia and Towson hadn't gotten their scores. Davis was getting the scores. They were getting 49s on the first 3 events. They started on bars, ended on vaults, but they had to hit vault, and then they led off with a fall on vault. So they had 5 very tense vaults after that, but they hit them, finishing with Kiana Abraham in the anchor position. And we've talked about her, Yurchenko 1.5 earlier this season. She hit vault, which was enough to get UC Davis into regionals, knocking out Towson. But usually it doesn't, usually we kind of see where things are going and it doesn't come down to the very last routine. And this time, of the contending teams at least, and this time there was a make or break routine to decide which teams made it. And that was very exciting to me.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that
It's almost like when there's a head-to-head, things are more interesting.
It is more interesting when you go score for score and you can see directly. This is like a really tense weekend for a lot of teams. This is the end. They had their senior meet at home, but if you don't qualify to regionals, that's it. Suddenly maybe ahead of time your season's going to be over because you know where your team is ranked, but that's it. And it's very exciting when it comes down to the last routine, and I like the drama.
Club Gym Nerd, you get discounts and first dibs on live show tickets, an extra whole podcast every week, athlete dossiers for major competitions, code guides, options to commission your own segments. It also makes a great gift. Check it out at gymcastic.com at the Join the Club tab.
All right, let's talk about NCAA regional selection. With the big show at the desks in the studios.
It was on TV for the first time. It was on ESPNU. There was a whole thing. It was an hour, Jessica. It was an hour long.
Okay. You said, it was a real show. It used to be basically 2 people on the internet with a phone reading names wrong. Mm-hmm. And it was just an afterthought, and the teams pretended to be excited even though they knew where they were already going. But I really appreciate that they gave the selection show, even though it's fake and everybody already knows where they're going, they did packages and they made it real, and they finally put Sam and John Roethlisberger in the studio behind desks where they should be. Not all these sports ball people
not
are always
bunched together with Allie.
Right. Not in a weird...
John and Allie next to each other, and then Sam kind of in front of them, she is the star of the family. They looked like a Von Trapp family singer situation, I felt like.
It was odd. So I love that they're giving this attention gymnastics deserves, and they had packages and research, and this is great. I love that it's putting gymnastics where it belongs, even if it's, the show is... Everybody already knows.
It's good for the sport. It could have been half an hour.
The more time gymnastics gets, the better. But carry on.
But then you should be in favor of more buys and meets and these 7-hour
How
meets.
dare you? More meets, no more buys.
Yeah, I think that's kind of my issue with the selection show is that, like, this is an email that you've made into an hour-long TV show. And because, like, there's a formula for the seeds, there are geography rules. Like, everyone already knows where they're going, so there's not a selection. There's not actually a selection. It's just the committee applied the rules, and we're like, this is where everyone's going. Everyone already knows, so the whole thing feels artificial.
Right.
Like, we're trying to make it like the other sports. It kind of is the same vibes as, when the men's college team put, like, numbers on the back of their singlets to be like, we're going to be like the other ball sports, even though it doesn't really apply to anything. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, but it's not, it doesn't really. But anyway, I recognize that it's good for the sport.
I am proud of you, Spencer. I'm proud of your perspective on this. And yeah, the thing that was different this time, though, is, like, it used to be that the teams would, like, jump up and down and cheer, like, they would pretend they didn't know where they're going. And now it's like they're cheering for it. It didn't seem as performative. They looked like they were cheering for themselves. Like, yeah, we're going to regionals. We're going to kill it. Not, oh my God. Before, like, the teams would do, oh my God, we're going. And then there'd always be the one person sitting there like, duh, you guys, haven't you read the rules? Like, we already have known this. Like, why are you acting like, oh my God, we're going there? But now it was just like, us. Yeah, that was the vibe that I got. And I appreciated that. Oklahoma, of course, were training with chandeliers hanging from their arms on beam in order to net. They're probably still standing there because they did not have a great meet. Yeah, they were training because they did not have time for your nonsense, and they did not have a good meet.
That was the most Oklahoma thing ever, that Oklahoma was not there for the frivolous part.
Yes, the most Oklahoma, and I love that about them. Ah, yes. Okay, who got Atlered?
Yes, we need to talk about it. We'll go through. Next week we'll do a regionals, we'll profile regionals. We'll go through what are the, who's in a tough regional, who do we think is going to advance, yada, yada, yada. But I want to talk about who got Atlered, who was the most victimized by it. That means you were victimized by a selection process, so meaning getting Atlered. So I would say Clemson wins the award for most victimized, most Atlered by NCAA regional selection. So basically what happened was Clemson finished 27th, but has to compete in a play-in meet to get into the actual regional semifinals, something the SEC could have had if they wanted to include all of their teams. They, as number 27, have to do that. Number 30, Boise State, does not have to do that. They are through already to the regional semifinals, basically because of the geographic rules that the NCAA has. So Boise State, BYU, and Utah State all had to go to the same regional in Utah because they're too close to it. So then BYU and Utah State are in the play-in. Boise State was ranked above them, so they're out of it. Same thing happened at the Penn State regional. Maryland and West Virginia are there, and Penn State. So Clemson, by virtue of not being geographically close enough to any of the teams that are randomly hosting it this year, they got screwed by the system and have to do an extra meet, even though their ranking should have qualified them out of it. And so it continues to be a problem because it's like, okay, well then why are we doing it? Why do we have a season if, like, the geography of where the regionals hosts are carries more weight than the actual results of who got the scores during the season?
Right.
So I think
this
Clemson
is the real
has
drama that should have been on
a right to just like do that like rhythmic gymnastics, throw the towel down really hard right before you march out. So yeah, I think they get the award for like you're allowed to throw a fit. You can throw a fit if you want to.
Yeah.
I think Minnesota also is free to throw a fit. So Minnesota finished tied for 10th, but got bumped to 12th for in the regionals draw because they were tied for 10th with Georgia. They lost the tiebreak to Georgia. The tiebreak is your next best score that isn't included as part of NQS. So they lost the tiebreak to Georgia. That bumped them down to 11th. Then Alabama had to be moved because they're a host, and they would have been in conflict with Utah, who was also a host, so they had to be moved. They were moved ahead of Minnesota. Minnesota's bumped down again to 12th and is now in the Utah-UCLA regional, and I think that's a very tough one for any other team that's trying to get to nationals as the two qualifiers, because Utah and UCLA will enter that one as significant favorites. I mean, with what Stanford scored at ACC, Stanford's in that one too. You never know, but I think that's a tough one to get into. So I think Minnesota got a worse draw than their ranking would have warranted typically, so they can be a little mad.
Yeah.
Cal can be mad because they got the regionals draw basically that we've been focusing on, warning about, like what number 2 seed has to go to Alabama at Alabama's hosted meet and try to beat them in the regional final to make nationals. And Alabama was moved again because there was a host conflict. So by ranking, Cal wouldn't have been paired with Alabama, but Alabama had to be moved because of the host conflict. And now it's Florida and Cal having to go to Alabama, which is going to be very interesting, but not the most fun draw. It's not what you would have picked if you could have picked it.
But I looked at that one and I was like, oh, they're going to be fine. Like, I'm not worried about.
I think I think Florida and Cal are the top 2 teams in that regional, but have you met college gymnastics?
I know.
And Alabama is an extremely good team. Like, the number 3 seeds, I think even if Alabama weren't at home, that's the team you would be worried about. And then the fact that they get to compete in a comfortable environment with their home fans just makes it even more dangerous as a potential spoiler for nationals.
Yeah.
Also victimized is us as a group, because we were denied the best part of the NCAA selection show each year, which is someone who's never heard of a gymnastic before, 5 minutes before they record this thing, and has no idea what any of the names are, and mangles all of them. And we were denied this joy by having John Roethlisberger and Sam Pesek do it, and they didn't even try to do the individual names, the individual qualifiers' names. They didn't even try. So I'm like, where are my mangled names?
I know. That's the problem.
That was the whole point of this as a video, was the mangled names, and then it's gone, and I'm not okay with it. I'm not happy.
It's like they're actual professionals who did their research beforehand and are on this, and I know. I'm sure they spelled. So let's see did they spell anything wrong on the NCAA website, though? Did they forget that
they
there
had
are
some
other
graphic errors on the broadcast?
Oh, there we go.
They had some time zone wrong, and I think they said Alana Lester instead of Alana Laster. So
Oof.
there were still some errors. So I'll allow it.
I mean, Sam and John can't be responsible for the graphics department too. I mean, my God, there's
only so much you can do.
They live on airplanes. Okay, so what were the meaning of these conference championships? Will you remind everybody?
I do have one more thing I want to complain about first.
Yes, Spencer.
Okay. Because I don't think we're going to necessarily get into this when we preview regionals, but I want to get it out there. Okay, the individual qualifiers, particularly the individual event qualifiers, how they have to do it is the teams that qualified for the play-ins are also have their individuals included as individual qualifiers. And the reason they do this is individual qualification to nationals is decided by your score in the regional semifinals. The play-in teams aren't guaranteed a spot in the regional semifinals because the team that loses the play-in won't compete that day. So then the individuals who have qualified from that team would still then have an opportunity to qualify, to compete individually on the regional semifinal day, so they could theoretically qualify to nationals. But the way that ends up playing out is that most of the individual qualifiers to regionals are qualifying with a team. They're going to regionals with a team. And so what these spots should be for are people from teams that are way out, that didn't qualify to the play-ins, didn't qualify at all, and still get an opportunity. And I think there are a lot of strong gymnasts from teams outside the 36 who I would like to have seen at regionals who are not qualified on events because all of those spots are filled up with people's people from your Illinois and your Clemson
Right.
and your Maryland and the teams that are in the play-ins, but they're there as teams.
Right.
So there needs to be a better way to get more actual individuals who aren't qualified to regionals with teams into these meets.
I mean, what I think we should do is we should go to the NCAA Coaches Conference and make a presentation that is so entertaining it cannot be ignored by the broadcasters who are the real ones that make a decision. Why did the coaches even bother to meet anymore? I don't know. But this is a good reminder about the individuals that, like, the conference championships, it's bragging rights and bonuses, and then it's also counts for your NQS. So that is what happened this weekend. So the conference, the conferences also mean nothing anymore. They're just broadcast bundles.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, geography doesn't matter for your conference anymore. So why should
Right.
it matter for your regionals?
Exactly.
For your regionals placement, Cal and Stanford have to go to are in the Atlantic Coast Conference. So
The most important thing, I forgot fact checker to highlight for you, but can you show this? The most important thing that this was an opportunity for at the conference championships were for ancient Celtic rituals. And I am, of course, referring to the Stanford, who won the award on College and Cocktails for most, what award did I give them? The most, like, it's gymnastics finals? Oh, we're ready for that. To Stanford. Stanford, of course, is always our favorite, like, meta joke, hipster, nothing is serious to them ever. And they don't do a stick crown because they're not going to buy plastic. That's terrible. They pick a stick from the local region to which they have traveled, from nature that has already fallen to the ground. They're not chainsawing things off or holding up a tiny beaver to do it for them. They are finding a stick on the ground, bringing it to the meet, and that is their stick, which is, of course, the joke play on words, which this is the Smarty Pants team, so of course they're going to do that. Them and Cal and UW and GW, there's many Smarty Pants teams, but Yale. But anyway, they did a full ritual where with the tree, which is their mascot, and they kneeled in front of the tree and called on the witches of yore, and I feel like all the Celts. It totally worked because they won handedly, beat the number 4 ranked team.
It was very close. But
yeah, it was very close, but they did great, which is always what they do. You're like, oh, Stanford. But then they're like, oh, no, we'll be ready just in time. We don't waste our time with the preseason. This is practice. We will do what we need to do when it's gymnastics finals. And they participated in a grand tree ritual, which they do a bonfire at the end of season and burn all the sticks. Because you must return the things to the earth from whence it came, or the atmosphere. So I wanted to mention individuals, even though they weren't properly given another hour on ESPN. We only got an hour.
An hour for an individual hour. Yeah.
Oh, but that's what we're for. So just some things before we get to our original preview next week. Individuals of note. Bree Clark, Clemson. Bree Clark, who's one of the almost whole team that followed their head coach from Utah State over to Clemson and was part of Team Zero, where they didn't get to compete. And she also has
you mean they were denied the opportunity? These hardworking female student athletes were denied the opportunity to compete? Clemson did what you're supposed to do, which, if you have the luxury to do so, which is spend a whole year getting your program ready to go before you start competing.
A disaster the first year. Yeah. So she has.
Which I recognize most schools do not have that luxury, and Clemson is a big, fancy athletic department that does have that luxury.
A lot of money. Bree Clark, of course, has I was about to say a Moores, but she probably has that too. But she has a Biles 1 on floor, so a double layout half, and she finally did it. We've been waiting all these years for her to compete it, and she did, and it was beautiful. And of course, since it's Clemson, they had a whole package ready in T-shirts and all the things, package as in a TV package ready to go for her. So she's also competing with her team, but she also qualified, which is the thing that Spencer was talking about. Luciana Alvarado-reid from Costa Rica, who goes to CMU. She's an Olympian. She's in the Tokyo Olympics. She's one of the Olympians who got away with what could be called a political stance. During her floor routine, she did the Black Lives Matter kneel with the Black Power salute, and she did it qualifying to the Olympics at the Olympic Games, and it's one of those things that if you wore that on a t-shirt, they might not let you do it. At the FIG might stop you, but that didn't happen in Tokyo, and it was great. So love her gymnastics. Isabella,
That's the lesson. Don't give them a warning of what you're doing if you're doing a political protest. Just do it.
Just do it.
When no one can stop you, like in the middle of a floor routine. Just say, just as a note for any future people who might be considering political protest during gymnastics meets. Do it during your routine. What are they going to do?
And this is why it's important, though, to have somebody like me with an Olympic credential, which was the first time ever a gymnastics podcast had been awarded. Now it's the second Olympics that we've been to. But I went to the AP and was like, hey, there's about to be a Black Lives Matter protest in this floor routine, you guys. Get on it. And since they were like, oh, there is, and we're very interested in stories like this, they got their incredible photographers, woman, by the way, on it and got shots of this and then covered it. And this is how media and journalism can all work together for the betterment, because we could not get a photographer there. Anyway, Isabella Minervini from Townsend. So, see, this is the kind of thing you could have looked forward to had they discussed the individuals.
Just have Jessica do it. Oh, that would have been the dream.
Can you imagine? Oh my God, I wish
it would have taken an hour just to try to read the names. They wouldn't have even needed any filler.
I was talking to Uncle Tim this week because there was this big article about a comedian who wrote a book about being dyslexic and how it took him 62 hours to record the audiobook. And which I was like, I realize now how much doing the fantasy show has helped me with reading out loud, because it still freaks me out to read out loud. And I still mess up the numbers. But doing the fantasy show, because Fact Checker it's the only show that we have a script for. And it's helped me so much doing that show because I'm just less scared. And so I have less mistakes. So it's really helped me. So thank you, everyone that's listened to that show, because you've helped me be less freaked out and more confident in my reading. Okay. Kendall Whitman from George Washington. Star Kendall Whitman of Invented Floor. If you get whatever you do, watch Kendall Whitman on Floor, because we've talked about her for years. We didn't talk about her a lot this year, but my God, she absolutely deserves it. Maggie Sliffy from Air Force, which I'm going to mention her because we've talked about her before, because I'm like, if you are at a military academy and you do a sport, well, first of all, you basically have to, but you're good at the sport, you can actually do it and have enough energy. It's nuts. And the fact that she's qualified as an individual from a military academy is insane. It's so hard. It's already hard being a college athlete. And I've talked about this before. You already have, a lot of people have to work and they have to do their 4 hours with their team, but then you also have to do your medical treatments. You have to go to the training room, and then you have all your...
You might have, school.
And I haven't even gotten to school. And then you also have to do all of the stuff to promote your sport, because you have to show up for the fundraiser stuff, and you have to shake hands and kiss babies because you have to raise money. And you have to do the things. You have to show up and do your community service and all the things that makes people donate to your program. And then all the travel. And then you have school, which so many people don't even go to school anymore. They just do online class, which the COVID babies are like.
Or they just do their homework before floor, like Ella Zerbas.
Right, which is also the right way to do it. But I'm like, you're missing out on so much if you're not in class. Like, this is where the crazy shit happens in class that you remember forever. Oh, I have stories. We should talk about that.
We have a topic for Friday.
Behind the scenes. Crazy things you saw when you actually... I saw something happen where that was the person's last day of school and they never came back. That was it. Ooh. Yeah, we're gone. Anyway, we'll talk about it on Behind the Scenes. But I'm just so impressed that Maggie made it from Air Force. It's incredible that she did it. There's just imagine your regular college insanity of being a college athlete times 1,000. That's what military academy is. I think you're only expected to sleep 5 hours when you're in a military academy. It's nuts. And then Chloe Cho of Illinois.
Yeah, my favorite, one of my highlights of regional or conference championships was Olivia Karras trying to say the Chloe Cho show, and it was a struggle, and that was great. And I'm really recognizing what a struggle it is because I also just struggled to shout and try to say Chloe Cho show.
The Chloe Cho
show. Good tongue twister.
Yeah, when you're an announcer who gives yourself a tongue twister on purpose, this is taking up another level. Liv Karras. Okay, but the real winners of the bragging rights championships.
Okay.
That we haven't talked about.
You already talked about Stanford's ceremony, and that's why I feel like you were the real winner, because you couldn't have scripted an event to happen in gymnastics that was more Jessica than Stanford doing like a stick curse ceremony.
Exactly. The best. But it's actually all the coaches who got bonuses from their athletes' performances. Those are the real winners.
I want to know what I want a write up of like what are the bonuses.
I know. Oh, maybe Daniel can do this of everyone's bonus. But the biggest one, because I was like, Jay Clark. I'm sure Jay Clark's getting paid the most, not because they've won the most times or anything, but because they have all the money to spend at LSU. But his bonus, he got $40,000 bonus when the team won.
Yeah.
Based on regular, basically his bonus structure is a lesson. If you can negotiate this, do it. Because it's basically if we're number one in anything in this time frame of the gymnastics rankings, then I get a double bonus. And so, yeah, $40K. That's more than most people make a year. The athletes earned him in one weekend. So, yeah, that's college gymnastics, you guys. But I have to say, for Jay Clark, he is one of the ones that said the way that we need to go is profit sharing and unionizing. So on the LSU, documentary thing they did last year. So I hope that he will start with himself. But I think that actually is against the NCAA rules for the sort of the. Is it anymore, though, with NIL? For the coach to literally rules? Just hand out money? Okay, craziness that happened.
All right.
Were all the 10s crazy?
The concept of having that many 10s is crazy to me, because a 10 should be an extremely rare pinnacle of a career moment. So if you have 11 10s in a day, even if you have the most amazing gymnasts there have ever been, then the entire system is too loose. Yeah. But like we said before, I wasn't, storming the castle about any of the 10s in particular.
Kara Akers' 0.3 error and then fall on beam was the most shocking craziness of the entire weekend for me. That switch mount, she had to grab the beam to stay on. That's 0.3, not a full fall, even though it should be. And then on her series, she excels under pressure, and I was totally shocked that this happened. So I think that was the craziest thing for me that happened, besides Oklahoma's bars. Little mistakes, but major, massive disaster for Oklahoma.
If you're Oklahoma. Yeah. Yeah, that was surprising to me. I thought, they were going to have it dialed in more, but I've kind of thought that all season. But they still got a 197.9. This was our other argument, whether Florida really should have been second instead of Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like they should have, but then again, you forget even when Oklahoma has these big errors, and my argument is there could have been more deductions for the errors if the judges were actually using all the deductions available to them. Mm-hmm. These scores could have been lower. And then Florida, I felt like Oklahoma should have been last in this. But
yes,
I feel like
you feel that way. I think Missouri had good moments, but their opening beam had some major wobbles.
Yeah, which I didn't see a lot of beam. I was watching a lot of stuff. I mostly watched their floor and their vault, which is.
And you watched your heart, and then you were like, Missouri's the winner, right?
It's also sometimes I think, This is why it's like there's my impressions and I have to watch certain routines and write down deductions because for me, this was a disaster for Oklahoma. But for college gymnastics, this was still one of the best performances, even with their airs, because they are so much better than everybody else because they do not have built-in deductions.
Some of them do, but overall, fewer.
Yeah. As a rule, and there's some of those there's also LSU. There's a lot of LSU athletes who have no built-in deductions too, like a Connor.
If you could just put
a
the
Haley,
Connor lineup up there.
Aaliyah Finnegan. So many except the bars bent elbows, which you talked about. You guys, the other thing we talked about in College of Cocktails, bending your elbows on bars is a deduction unless you're in the air. You must be not touching the bar. So kips, cast handstands, free hips, all of it. Giants, if you bend your arms, it's a deduction. Your elbows have to stay straight the whole time. This is why so many 10s are not 10s on bars. Unless you're Mara Titchersole of the Netherlands, the great transfer from the LIU to Missouri, who absolutely deserved her 10 because her routine was absolutely perfect. Any other craziness?
No, I don't think there... I mean, the most surprising thing to me, I think, was Stanford beating Cal at ACCs. I don't think that was craziness, but just in terms of the result I wouldn't have picked. Like, I think if you're if you're predicting the winners, like Utah winning Big 12s, UCLA winning Big 10s, LSU winning SECs, those were what I would have picked. But I wouldn't have picked Stanford winning ACCs. So maybe is it crazy? No, but that's the interesting or the upset or the whoa. I just wish it had been slightly different timing, and I want these conferences to work together a little bit more so that it's not I have to live blog every routine from SEC championships and I'm missing the end of ACCs.
Okay, one crazy thing that I want to mention that is not gymnastics, but I want to talk about it. There was a 5-time, as in 5 years in a row, NCAA champion in wrestling. 5. Wow. You might ask, but that's not possible. Because if you won 5 times, that means you had an entire complete season 5 times. But this is a reminder of the horrors of the COVID year. That even people who got a national championship, got a whole season, still got an extra year. We'll never get over the injustice that is the COVID year nightmare. That are all the people who didn't get to finish, didn't get a senior season, like Maggie Nichols. Yeah. There was also someone who showed up at wrestling national championships who we'll talk about on Behind the Scenes. Highlights from this past weekend that we haven't talked about so far. Jade Carey's last meet at home, which was not senior night, but it was their last meet, and it was against Fisk. And I love that they had a meet against Fisk, and that we got to see Morgan Price on TV, as she always should be. There's also Zaya Coleman at Fisk. Her floor is one you should absolutely seek out and watch. She is the choreographer for the team. And in general, the team choreography is it's fine. I wouldn't say it's anything special. It's standard. I mean, it's better than some, but it's not. It could be more. But her routine is creative. It's different. It marries modern with an African with some popping and locking, but not popping and locking that's out of place with the music. It goes with it. It flows. It's so interesting and different. The choices she makes in the choreography, and it all works as a theme. So Zaya Coleman, Fisk, ZYIA. I would look for her routine because it's worth watching and it's really interesting. I think Fisk could be great on floor, but their conditioning is not there. They need an actual gym. They need actual athletic facilities on campus, that kind of thing. But it was really fun to watch them. And Yeah, this is how I came up with my back to this was at Oregon State and Jade Carey. My prediction that Jade will be our Chuso, the American Chuso. Also, Jade is the only American who's done 4 consecutive NCAA season with no breaks with 2 Olympics. I mean, granted, the Olympics were only 3 years apart, but like, even if it was, she did an Olympics and it was 4 years in another Olympics, she took no seasons off. No one else, no Americans have done that. I think there's Canadians who've done that. I think, who was the one at Georgia who went to 2 Olympics?
Did Brittany Rogers go to 2
Brittany
Olympics?
Rogers. I don't think Brittany Rogers took any time off. I don't think Kate Richardson did. That's the thing. She just is, whatever her training or genetics are, she just doesn't seem to need any breaks. Like, she's always just as good and only getting better. Like Chuso, better form now than she's ever had on vault. And she was a Soviet gymnast. They have the greatest form ever. They're the greatest gymnastics team to ever live. She was one of them that won a gold medal at the Olympics. Yeah. And Jade did both GOAT tours. So durable.
Busy.
Yeah.
Indestructible.
Since, no one actually goes to school anymore. You can just do all your classes online. It's fine.
Yeah. I have my answer about the craziness, which is we didn't talk about Georgia's 2/10 neutral team deduction.
Tell us everything.
Okay, so I don't like what was going around online was that it was for leaving the springboard on beam.
Oh, for Kara?
I don't know. I didn't notice.
Oh, okay. We will do some investigating and get back to you on this. Ooh, that is like a... Because it wouldn't have made a difference for them, though, the 2/10.
No, they ended up... But that would have, theoretically, rankings difference, but they won the tiebreak against Minnesota anyway. Yeah. And this was not a counting score for them, because they only got a 195.95, so it would have been 2/10. It didn't make a difference. That's
a big oversight. That's like a... And also, this is the thing. Normally, you have like your volunteer or your fourth assistant coach or someone like takes the board away. Like this is, or they have these teams where they like pay boys scholarships to move the mats, which is my favorite thing ever. Because who wouldn't want that job? Like you get to, this is your scholarship. It's so great. Wow. I wonder if there was something up that someone just didn't think of it. Or at the last minute, the gymnast was like, don't move it. It messes me up. And they forgot, oh, that's a deduction. Eek. Okay. Corrupt or correct, where we discuss the impossible scores of the week, or inconsistencies in scoring. In the immortal words of Spanny Tamsin, quote, "You can't huff glue all day giving scores and then not give Brooklyn her 10, end quote.
Yeah, I mean, that is how I agree with kind of that about, UCLA went 49.8 on floor. That was one of the big ones. Florida's 49.85 on bars, where it's like, yeah, it's too high. But if you were doing that, the whole meet. If you gave 9 9s to the routines that were getting 9 9s, Jordan Childs is an 11.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, Aaliyah, let's look at the beam score sheet while we talk about this, because there is a judge's cheat sheet basically, which is a one pager for each of these. So let's pull up the beam deductions and look at Aaliyah Finnegan's bars. Bars.
Let's pull up the beam deductions and then talk about a bars routine. Let's deduct it like it's on beam.
This is why I don't do a live TV show. Oh wait,
Balance check on a
we do this once a week actually. Okay, so Finnegan's bars. Okay. Obviously, we're not talking about Finnegan. We're talking about the judging of her bars. We're talking about the judges, not the gymnasts. The gymnasts are doing their best, and we get to see Finnegan's absolutely beautiful Delchev half. So, Delchev half? Yeah, a Delchev.
Well, Delchev is
with a half.
So, but it's piked rather than straddled, which is what most Delchevs we see. Although we don't see Delchevs.
No, but it is harder because you can't straddle. You can if you're off, you can just lean forward through your legs and grab the bar. If you're piked, you got to wait So your legs are all the way rotated out of the way and then grab, which should be the way you're doing it because you should be fully extended when you grab the bar, not in a pikey position for no deduction. So that's another thing. So Finnegan's bars, she got a 995. And my contention is that that's not actually a possible score.
Okay.
Because bent arms on her toe-on handstand.
Mm-hmm.
Missed a handstand. Short of 10 degrees. You can do it with 10 degrees of handstand, no deduction. But it was much shorter than that. I would say
10
30.
10 is not many degrees.
Right.
If you think about like at horizontal is 90, you can only miss by 10.
Yeah. I would say she was more at about 30 degrees from the angle we were seeing, which again, this is the TV angle. And then the balance on the dismount. So landed, tried to stick it, had to wave an arm, move herself. That's another deduction.
We had a lot of, that's maybe the one like about some of the 10s we saw. We had some balance on the dismount on several of them.
The only movement you can have on a dismount for no deduction is moving your feet in so that your heels touch. That's the only thing to show that your legs aren't too far apart.
Moving your heels together, but not like moving your feet.
Right. They can't slide forward. They can't slide back.
It has to stay there.
They can't come off the mat, even, just enough so that there's air between the surface of the mat and the foam. That's also a deduction. They can't come up or move, but you can rotate them so that your heels touch. But otherwise, you can't move. That's the thing. And there were a lot of those. So I think Finnegan's bars should have been more of at the very highest, a 9.8, going by the actual code, which is the whole problem, the unwritten rules versus the written rules. And this is a problem that the judges face. And again, reminder that there is no qualitative system of choosing the most accurate judges. It is the assigners go by reputation, who they've worked with, who people say, oh, this person judges really well. That's how people are assigned. Still, in the year 2025 of our Lordess Rodunova, Gabby Stevens, beam. First,
Steven. Singular Steven.
Steven, I always want to call her Gabby. There was Gabrielle Stevens. She is one of the gymnasts that came out very early. And there's Gabby Steven.
That was Gabriella Douglas.
Gabriella, sorry. See, there's so many Gabby Douglases. But she's not one. She's a Gabby Steven. Not even a Douglas.
Well, so we're off the rails now.
You guys. Well, it was a long day on Saturday of a lot of gymnastics.
Long day.
This was the first MSU 10 on beam in the history of MSU gymnastics, where they're one of the OG teams.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't really surprise me, though. I mean, they've been at this current level still for not that long.
Yeah, their beam. I still say, watch you guys regionals. Watch Michigan State's vault compared to all the other teams. Their vault is so good, and I mean all the things that happen in the air that are supposed to count towards your deductions, not just how you land. The thing with her, I'm so stoked for her, and we've talked about her for a long time. Love it. Her series. Her legs are bent out of her jump for a long time, and the thing is, I kind of like. It's kind of stylistic the way she does it, because she's doing her back handspring layout, and her legs they're really bent jumping off the ground instead of extending off the ground, but then she kicks them straight right as she goes over vertical. So it's kind of cool looking, but your legs have to be straight when you leave the ground. You shouldn't be not extending them. That's the whole thing about the jump. From you bend and then you straighten. They don't get straight till they're halfway over. So that can't be a 10. That's how much is that deduction? So a 0.5 each?
Yeah. As we learned from Allie Raceman, in an international elite, that would be a downgraded skill. In college gymnastics, it's a 0.5 deduction.
There you go.
Everything. Just assume that everything is a 0.5 if it's taken at all.
Yeah.
Which is one of our problems. You can take, things can be a 10th, things can be 2 tenths.
which is why
Usually things are up. A lot of things are up to 0.3.
Right, and there should be no up to deductions. It either is exactly, or this is the whole thing they changed in the FIG code to get rid of that nonsense, because it should not be subjective. It should be an exact angle, period. So the other thing I want to talk about is that I love that one of the networks, I think it was the SEC network, put out a compilation video of the perfect 40 record, which is the Karen Leachy, who got... Did I say it right?
I mean, I've always said Litchi, but we're going with it.
Okay, I've always said Leachy, which...
Like a Leachy, yeah. I've always said Litchi, but this is, like, I'm surprised you're now suddenly caring about your pronunciation.
This is... So the reason I bring this up in the Corrupt or Correct is because this is I think one of the most important documents about why judging in NCAA gymnastics, who again is the only sport that doesn't have a person in charge of the judging, is because you can see that these aren't 10s. From way back then, even when the code was different, these aren't 10s. I mean, Karen Leach was amazing because she does a freaking Miller on beam. That's how cool she was, you guys, which is the back handspring, and then you quarter turn, but then you keep going into a pirouette. And then I love that skill. Nobody does it because it's so freaking hard, but she did it and in college. So like so much great gymnastics, but like even the first one, her feet slide on vault. It's not a stick. So yeah, I wish
there's a reason. We've had a term, the college stick. And they tried to get rid of it with the holding the finish position, which like most people have forgotten about.
The one other thing that I wanted to mention before we end the show, because I think it is something our listeners pointed out that I had not seen, and this is unrelated to, well, it is related to college gymnastics, but this has now been deleted. But Gabby McLaughlin, who is at Auburn, posted a picture on her TikTok that has a picture of her and her team at Texas Dreams, and there's a picture of her former coach, Kim Zemeskel, and this is what the picture says. Had anxiety attacks before practice every morning. Screamed at me and sent me to conditioning for 2 hours when I was 2 minutes late to second practice because I was just told my uncle passed away. It says she hated gymnastics and wanted to quit every day. Couldn't see out of my eye for a week because my coach whipped me in the eye with a TheraBand for doing a bad vault. It says abuse. And it says, grabbed my leg with an arrow pointing at Kim Zemeskel and yanked me off the high beam because I fell on a skill and sent me home. These are the kind of things that when I see, I'm like, okay, well, I hope when you're having anxiety attacks every day before practice, that I'm like, why were your parents aware of this? And why did they ever send you back again? And then reading this, I'm like, okay, if your parents didn't know, I hope you have filed a safe sport complaint because that is what it is for. So this is the kind of thing that I'm like, this is what it's for. It was long fought to create this system. And so file a safe sport complaint. It's important. And it's very sad to read that. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to discuss this week?
I don't think so. Well, next week we'll talk about our regionals. We'll talk about our unseeded spoilers. I'm sure Jessica will have another list of individuals to watch.
So many, you guys. The individuals are the most important ones, you guys. Obviously, it's easier with a team. Everything's harder as an individual, you guys. So, I'm just saying, individuals, be very proud of yourselves. Also, if you've written a letter to us, know that we read all the letters, especially Evan the engineer. I love your letters. I've read them all. This vault bonus thing, very interesting. We will get to more letters. The letters we can't get to, we get to on College and Cocktails or Behind the Scenes. And again, Behind the Scenes is regular time, noon Pacific this week. And remember, the drink for lunchtime on Friday is Pain of Elimination. Or the mocktail. If you're at work, bring your mocktail and join. And until Friday at noon. Remember to take off on gay and split on rights. And we'll see you behind the scenes at noon Pacific. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support.